Picture this: Albuquerque, New Mexico. The desert sun still burns, but the world's gone cold. Dead cold. The streets are empty except for the slow shuffle of feet that forgot how to walk, and the only thing cooking in RVs isn't meth anymore. It's rotting flesh. Zombies now rule the Southwest. Society? Gone. Morality? Optional. And from the ashes of what used to be civilization rises one man who is already halfway to apocalypse mode before things even fell apart. Walter Hartwell White. He was a chemistry teacher, a kingpin, a war criminal, a cancer patient, and a suburban dad with a god complex and a knack for turning everyday objects into weapons of mass destruction. And now, he's our latest test subject in the scientific experiment known as, would Walter White survive a zombie apocalypse? In today's post-apocalyptic breakdown, we're analyzing Walt's survival potential across 3 distinct phases of his Breaking Bad evolution. Early Walter White, the khaki-clad teacher who just learned his life is a ticking time bomb. Prime Heisenberg, the empire-building egomaniac with a pork pie hat and no moral compass. Late-stage Walt, the bearded cabin hermit with cancer, no friends, and one hell of a final act. We'll judge Walt on key survival categories: weaponry, food and water access, shelter and community, medicine and health, relationships with other survivors. Each phase ends with a zombie survival scorecard, followed by a final verdict on whether Heisenberg would reign supreme or just become brain buffet in a matter of days. Let's cook. Phase 1. Early Walter White. Season 1 Walt. A meek chemistry teacher, underpaid, overqualified, and rocking some truly unfortunate khakis. Let's be honest, if the zombies came during this phase, Walt's odds of survival would be not great. This version of Walt is cautious, insecure, and doesn't yet have the grit to bash in a walker's skull. Sure, he knows chemistry, but he's more likely to use it to make teaching aids than Molotov cocktails. His go-to weapon at this point? Probably a golf club. Or, if he's feeling brave, the same windshield squeegee he used at the car wash. But here's the thing. Even in this soft form, Walter is still resourceful. The man builds a battery in the desert using scrap metal and science. If he were holed up in a house with some supplies and time, he could absolutely rig up some zombie-repelling contraptions. Booby traps? Chemical deterrents? DIY explosives? Early Walt might not be a fighter, but he's definitely a thinker. That said, this version of him also still has a moral compass. He wouldn't be able to make the hard choices quickly, like putting down a bitten friend or stealing from other survivors. He's also not physically conditioned for apocalypse life. If cardio's the #1 rule, Mr. White is already doomed. Scorecard: Early Walter White. Weaponry: 3 out of 10. Food and water access: 4 out of 10. Shelter and community: 5 out of 10. Medicine and health: 6 out of 10. Relationships: 4 out of 10. Overall score: 4.3 out of 10. Science fair survivor: apocalypse victim. But, as we know, Walter doesn't stay soft for long. The cancer spreads, the meth starts flowing, and the man once known as Mr. White is now cooking up more than just crystal. Let's enter the golden age of ego and manipulation. Prime Heisenberg. Phase 2. Prime Heisenberg. Now we're cooking. This is peak Breaking Bad era Walt. The man with the hat, the empire, and the god complex. By now, he's orchestrated assassinations, built a mobile meth lab, and manipulated everyone from cartel bosses to suburban moms. And when the zombies hit, Heisenberg doesn't just survive, he thrives. Weaponry. This is the man who walked into Tuco's headquarters and threw a chunk of mercury fulminate onto the floor like it was a party trick. No M60 turret yet, but the guy's practically a walking chemistry set of death. He could cook explosives, make poisons, and weaponize any drugstore like it's Home Depot with a grudge. Food and water. Remember, Walt ran a meth empire with international logistics. Scaling down, he could manage food storage, water filtration, and even cook up synthetic meds or alcohol. And he'd hoard it like gold, doling it out to followers like post-apocalyptic Breaking Bad communion. Shelter and community. He could absolutely establish a survivor base, maybe even a self-sufficient compound. But it wouldn't be pretty. It'd be run like Gus Fring's operation, except instead of mutual respect, it's just fear and carefully measured threats. Think more dictator bunker than friendly campfire. Medicine and health. Still got cancer. Still pushing through. Walt in this phase is ridiculously stubborn and willing to operate even when barely standing. He'd probably make his own chemo if he had to, or synthesize opioids for pain relief. Resourceful to a fault. Relationships. Here's the kicker. Walt alienates literally everyone. Jesse, traumatized. Skylar, done. Hank, dead. In a zombie apocalypse, that kind of personality gets you stabbed in your sleep. He might gather a crew, but loyalty would be shaky at best. Scorecard. Prime Heisenberg. Weaponry. 9 out of 10. Food and water access. 8 out of 10. Shelter and community. 6 out of 10. Medicine and health. 7 out of 10. Relationships. 4 out of 10. Overall score. 6.8 out of 10. Apex predator, but one scandal away from mutiny. But even kings fall. And when Heisenberg's empire collapses, Walt becomes a shadow of himself. Alone, sick, hiding from the world in a snowy cabin. But does that make him weak? Or something worse? Let's meet the final form of Walter White. Phase 3. Late Stage Walt. Cabin Fever Edition. Now we get to the broken man, the fugitive, the lonely, bearded hermit hiding in a cabin while the world forgets him. At first glance, this phase seems weak. Walt's dying, isolated, and off the grid. But he's also done hiding. This is the guy who builds a machine gun robot in the trunk of a car while coughing up his lung lining. Let's address the obvious. Walt didn't actually survive solo. Ed Galbraith, the disappearer, made monthly runs, delivering food, water, chemo, supplies. Walt was self-isolating with support. Without Ed, he likely wouldn't have lasted long. Hunting, gathering, filtering water, those aren't his skills. But this version of Walt is dangerous in a new way. He's got nothing to lose, and that makes him fearless. He'd walk into a zombie horde with a gas mask and a pressure cooker bomb just to prove a point. He's still calculating, still methodical, but there's a madness now. Scorecard. Late Stage Walt. Weaponry. 8.5 out of 10. Food and water access. 3.5 out of 10. Without Ed, 1 out of 10. Shelter and community. 4 out of 10. Medicine and health, 2 out of 10. Relationships, 2.5 out of 10. Overall score, 4.8 out of 10. Final boss energy, but no respawn. Final verdict. Would Walter White survive a zombie apocalypse? So, after analyzing all 3 volatile versions of Walter White, each more morally bankrupt than the last, what's the final takeaway? Well, here's the breakdown. Early Walt was clever, but cautious. He could rig a battery in the desert, sure, but he'd also probably get eaten while trying to reason with a growling corpse, or stop mid-escape to correct a stoichiometry error. Score, 4.3 out of 10. Science fair survivor, apocalypse victim. Heisenberg, on the other hand, is your ideal zombie warlord. He turns pool chemicals into bombs, lies like it's a second language, and builds meth empires out of thin air. But his leadership is toxic, his alliances are fleeting, and his ego would probably get him killed. Score, 6.8 out of 10. Apex predator, but one scandal away from mutiny. Late stage Walt? He's dying, completely alone, and fueled purely by vengeance. His genius peaks here with inventions like the M60 trunk gun, but his physical health and social game are rock bottom. Without Ed Galbraith's monthly care packages, he wouldn't last a week. Score: 4.8 out of 10. Final boss energy, but no respawn. Final zombie survival rating. If Walter beats the cancer, 7.5 out of 10. Dangerous, cunning, and likely to outlast most survivors, even if he ends up ruling over a commune of corpses and broken relationships. If the cancer returns or resources dry up, 2 out of 10. The cancer gets him before the zombies do. Or he gets dramatic and takes himself out in a blaze of gory glory. One thing's for sure, he won't go quietly. Walter White may not win the apocalypse, but he'll definitely leave behind a high body count and an even higher body temperature. He's not in danger, he is the danger.